This was an outgrowth of a show that I was doing where a fellow from New Zealand came up and told me about a beetle they had that was either, I can't remember, in Australia or New Zealand, but it was a bright green beetle, and he said that at certain times of the year the thing was everywhere. I'm not sure, but I think it's the gum beetle that they get there. So this one came to be known as the Kiwi Fleetle because we didn't know whether to call it a beetle or a fly. So it's sort of an outgrowth of two different names. It's a little bit different from the Japanese beetle because there are actually two backs on this thing. One of the backs is tied with a green Swiss straw, and over that is a piece of crinic material that's a beautiful bright metallic green. Good beetle color there. Underneath will be a foam body just like the Japanese beetle. Again, underneath that we will have the Peacock Curl, and then the head will be tied just a little bit different from that of the Japanese beetle. Just a little bit different material will be used there. Combination of two different types of feather. So we'll tie one of these Kiwi Fleetles. This is tied on a number 12 2x long dry fly hook. Any standard 2x long dry fly hook will work like a charm. I usually use Teamco 5212s. And the technique is very, very similar to that for the Japanese beetle. All we'll do is attach the thread to the shank of the hook. Again, bring it all the way back to the bend. I just like to cover that hook shank with thread because it gives me a good solid tie down for any of this backing material. Now the sequence of tying in these next two materials is important. You want to put one material in first because that's going to be ultimately what rides on top. Green Swiss straw is one of the materials I'll use for the back. The other is this crinic, really bright, brilliant metallic green ribbon. Again, it's a 1/8 inch wide metallic ribbon. For reference, it's number 008. So those are the two materials that I'm going to use for the back on this beetle. What I'm going to do is first of all tie in this bright green ribbon, crinic ribbon. I'm going to start right about in the middle of the hook shank. Tie that down, wrap it all the way to the rear. I'm going to bring the thread back forward and tie in that green Swiss straw. Now the Swiss straw is going to come in different shades. You can't always be sure that you're going to get the bright green. You may find a little darker green. If you run into the bright green and you're going to tie a lot of these things, just go ahead and buy a nice supply of it. It'll last you a long time. So we're tying this green Swiss straw next, right on top of that crinic green ribbon. You notice this is very similar to the Japanese beetle as far as the tying sequence. I've just got two pieces of back material instead of one. Again, the body is going to be tied with that 1/8 inch thick black foam, closed cell foam. Same sort of thing we used on the Japanese beetle, about the same width. It's not much difference in that. Again, when I get to this width, I'll trim that to a little point. It just makes it easier to tie in. Start tying that in right at that point on the hook shank. Wrap it to the rear. Then wrap your thread forward a little bit, just about 1/8 of an inch, because the next step is the old Peacock Curl. Like I say, I use a ton of this. I haven't found anything better. And when you stop and think about it, you look at these beetles and so many of them are this color, and I just can't help but think that it makes a big difference. Remember, tie your Peacock Curl in by the tips. When you wrap it, it's just going to fuzz up nicely. And I'm going to stop the thread wrap right about at that point there. Wind my Peacock Curl forward. You notice how that just fuzzes up. When your fingers push that hurl rear to the rear, it just really fuzzes up nicely. It's going to give you a nice iridescent body on this fly. And we'll stop right there. Notice I've got plenty of hook shank and the front to work with, and that's important on this fly because you got a little more material than you do on that Japanese beetle. Now we do the same thing that we did on that Japanese beetle. I'm just going to fold that foam forward. Again, do not pull the foam. You do not want to stretch this foam or you'll lose a lot of the flotation properties. So we'll just push that foam forward, hold it in place, tie her down. Then just trim that forward projecting piece of foam as close as you can and wrap that down nice and tight. Then we put the wings in. There's nothing unusual about the wings. I'm going to use the same material, this Krynic ribbon that I use for the wings on these other beetles. I love this stuff. We cut a little piece of that. Again, you don't want long wings on this. You want to keep these wings relatively stubby. I'll just lay that in place, hold it down, tie it in. Give it 3 or 4 good wraps. Pull up that forward projecting piece and trim it at a slight angle. It's going to tie down a lot easier that way. Bring the thread all the way back to where the body stops here at the front. Again, using your scissors, needle, whatever, go in and separate the winging material. Pull half to one side, half to the other. Take your Swiss straw, simply fold it over the top, hold the wings back, just kind of hold it in position like that. Using your left hand, come over, give it 3 or 4 good tight thread wraps, and trim it. Notice I always trim this material at an angle. If you trim it square, it's going to form a shelf there, and it's going to be hard to do the next steps. Then take this Krynic ribbon, fold that over. That's going to give a beautiful sparkly back on this. Tie it off the same way. Again, trim that forward projecting portion at an angle, just like that. Now we got to put a little head on this, and instead of just using Peacock Curl as I did with the Japanese beetle, I'm going to use 2 pieces of Peacock Curl and 1 piece of black ostrich. And I'm going to twist them together, and that way it's going to fuzz this out. It's going to give a nice fuzzy head on this beetle. So we'll take a couple of strands of Peacock Curl, find 2 good ones here, cut those, take 1 strand of black ostrich, and we'll just lay those down right there together and pick them up as a group. And right where that ostrich curl stops, I'm going to kind of stroke that up, trim them right at that point. So I've got all 3 of those strands right there together. Then we'll just tie everything in by the tip. Tie it down good. Bring your thread all the way forward to right behind the eye of the hook. Now the next step in this, I use these little, I don't know exactly what you'd call these. I guess they're circuit testers or something like that. You can get these at a electronic store. Fly shops sell them. Just pick up a pair. They make good hackle pliers, and they're excellent for what I'm going to do here. So I've got those clamped in this little hook on this circuit tester, and I'm just going to twist that hurl, those 3 strands together. Don't do it too much or you have a problem with breakage. Then when they're twisted nicely, we just wrap that around 2 or 3 turns, maybe 4. Bring it right up to the thread and tie that off. Tie it down good. Trim away the forward projecting material, and then finish the head of the fly. Just take your whip finisher, just like you did with everything else, and wrap a nice little head on this thing. And we're through. Now this fly just has a beautiful green iridescence.